Hey, what's up there, Kirk of Effectatron, and today I'm going to show you a direct lesson from the Mind in Motion Fundamentals course, which is going to be using scene node operators to model geometry. It's a really cool procedural way and a non-destructive way to model some really cool things. I'm going to talk about creating these really nice Greeble effects ever since kind of JS displacement went away. So this is like a way to make these really cool natural Greebles, like literally an infinite amount of them without texture maps and without having to generate these things. You can just do them inside on any piece of geometry. So that's what's awesome about it, and you can control every aspect of it. So we're just going to take a dive into this and take a look at this. And again, this is a straight lesson out of the Mind and Motion Fundamentals course. Both the Mind and Motion Fundamentals and Animate are available at the time of this video until the end of April 2025. You can actually save extra when you bundle right now, an extra 20% with code SPRING2025, and so it's only $200 to get the $300 value of both courses. So you can save $100 right now. Go ahead and click that link below and start learning, especially if you like the content. There's over 100 lessons, so if you like this style of stuff and the way I teach, it's really fun and really cool, and I really like this lesson, so I wanted to share it with you guys and just let you know what is inside the Mind in Motion course. All right, let's get into it. All right, in this lesson, we're going to go ahead and cover creating Greebles, but rather than using texture maps and JS displacement and stuff like that, and then using Redshift displacement to create it, because JS placement isn't really available for everyone anymore. It's this really cool software that could create Greeble maps from scratch, but because it's not really available as easily as it used to be, we're actually just going to use node operators to create this. So basically, we're creating procedural and animatable Greebles. Just within inside of Cinema 4D with no texture map. So let's delete this, go ahead and add a cube, and we'll up our segments to, like, I don't know, 10 and 10 and 10. And then we're going to rotate this, hold shift, do 45 degrees, and then hit W, make it rotate in world space, hold shift again, and just rotate that down. And we'll pull that up a bit, like so, and maybe make our cube a little smaller, 100, 100, 100. Yeah, there we go. And we'll go ahead and make our camera lens just a little bit longer so it's a little less distorted. There we go. Now it looks more like the Redshift logo. Pretty cool. So how does this work? Well, we need to open up the asset browser, and we're not actually going to be using scene nodes to generate this, but we are going to be using node operators. So we have this operators tab here, and if we go to nodes, you see we have more things to control, right? We have these like red issues, distribution things, but we can't click and drag these over. These have to be built in the scene node thing. But if we go to operators, nope, okay, doesn't matter. We can't click and drag these over. It doesn't really work that way. You have to build it in the scene node operator. But there are some things that you can click and drag over. So here's what we're going to go. We're going to go down here to geometry modifiers. And here we have these like yellowy squares. These are what we want to use. These appear, they're called nodes. Some of them can't be clicked and dragged over, some of them can, but normally not so much. But what we want is these node operators which can be clicked and dragged over. And these are just going to kind of be a way to add an effect. Think of them as deformers, but they can do more than deform, because they can do things like geometry selection, where we can randomly select faces and stuff like that to just kind of add more generic procedural generation into our object. Now, it's kind of confusing just by talking about it, so let's go ahead and show off just what it's doing. Firstly, I want to say I'm not a huge fan of the fact that some of these are locked behind the Maxon 1 paywall. I think that's dumb. If you were paying for C4D already, let us use things that are built in here. But I mean, I'm not in control, so that's fine. But one thing that's really cool is the fact that we have Greeble. We have Greeble here. We can favorite that. So it puts it up here in the beginning so we can find it faster. And we can just click and drag this Greeble and just put it on our cube. And that's just going to put that right on our cube and instantly add a Greeble to our objects. Now, the way this Greeble works, I'm going to switch to quick line and shading so we can see this a little better. It basically has two methods, and really it's just kind of like an extrusion and a noise layer combined into one, except we can't really see it in a preview kind of way. We're just going to see the end result. So it's not the easiest to work with. It kind of has a little trial and error, and you just kind of fiddle around with things to figure out how it looks, but it does work pretty well. I will warn you that if you're doing a very high poly model, it does start slowing down and gets, you know, pretty chunky pretty quick. But it just So keep that in mind. So basically the way this works is it's going to create a weight map on here that's going to affect our faces and our polygons of our geometry and tell it to either do some value in between the minimum extrusion and the maximum extrusion. So it's either going to say, hey, suck it in 5 centimeters or punch it out 20, that kind of thing. And the reason it's like punching out some and then sucking in some is because we have a set to do 2 iterations. So the first iteration, it's applying one of these things, which apparently it's applying the extrusion, and then the second iteration, it's applying the minimum extrusion. So if we take this down to 1, you'll see it's probably just going to punch that out. And it's randomly assigned, but we could come in here and take down these subdivisions because we can up our subdivisions and stuff in here. So basically you have a built-in subdivision surface that doesn't smooth inside of our shape here. So there's a couple things we can do with this. We can take it down to 0 because I like just having our basic flat geometry on here. And then we can come in here and change it from interpolated mesh plus weight to just noise selection. And that kind of just makes more sense and it's easier for me to wrap my head around. So now we can just choose a noise type like cell, and we can just scale that up. And as we make it smaller, we see we select more. We make it bigger, we're getting like bigger chunks, right? So smaller scale, smaller little selection types. That makes sense and it's easy for me to wrap my head around. And then threshold is basically a lower threshold, means more are going to be selected. Higher threshold, less are going to be selected. So this is kind of like contrast on our noise pattern. And then what we have is minimum extrusion, which we can set to 0. And so now it's not extruding those at all. It's definitely not extruding it at all because we have our minimum extrusion set to 0, so it doesn't have to apply anything. And then at max, we have this ability to either say suck it in or push it out. And we're going to say to push it out just a little bit here, maybe 5 centimeters. And then we have a taper angle. And if we crank that up, you'll see it's going to really, it's easier to see when you have these extruded out. We're going to make them kind of this weird kind of taper effect, obviously. And we can increase that higher than the slider goes and taper it all the way down into points if you wanted to make like spikes and stuff like that. But we're going to take this all the way down to 0. And then we have max island angle. So basically this is like, at what point do you want these to start grouping together? So if we take that down to 0, we will have more individual cubes, which we'll see more of when we come down here to like add a taper on this. You'll see that we actually now are tapering off each individual cube versus when we have them as an angle, they start joining together, right? So it's kind of like this Fong tag in a way. So we'll go ahead and keep that at 0 and it won't really matter too much. And we'll just come down here like so, maybe do like 14%, lower that threshold to 53%. And we can either decrease this or increase this. And if we do a minimum extrusion of 1 and then, try to change those iterations, you'll see it's going to start stacking those on top. And we're going to kind of create little mini cities really quickly. And we can just start messing around with these values and things. If we wanted to add taper, we could to that. And then we can mess with that island angle. And instantly we can create this really cool kind of Greeble look, just like that, just by playing around with a couple of these sliders. But honestly, to me, the easiest way to create a Greeble look is not even with the Greeble modifier. So we're actually going to delete that. And we're going to create it with more control, because it's a lot of guessing and it's still going to be a little guesswork, but it's a lot easier to kind of wrap my head around. Again, I know I keep saying that, but I think it'll help you kind of understand what's actually happening when we build it this way. So we're going to go down here to geometry selection, and there's a node operator called random selection. And we're going to take that and apply that onto our cube. Now, if we switch in here to polygon face or anything, it's still not going to show us anything. We have no visual representation of what's happening here, which is a bit of a bummer. I wish we could, but it's just kind of a random chance of what we're going to select. So 50% chance that we're going to select your face. So 50% of our faces are going to be selected. And then we just have a random seed that's going to assign which face is being selected. And then on top of that, we can stack on a modifier. And rather than doing Greeble, we can do something just like extrude. So we can take this extrude and put it below our random selection. And now as we adjust this random selection, you can see it's adjusting what's being selected to apply our extrude onto. So it's a little more controllable and understandable, where it's kind of breaking down that Greeble effect into layers that we have more control on. And the one thing that we have a lot more control of, that's what I think the Greeble layer is really missing, is this offset variation. So we can come in here and offset that, so we have like a lot more variation with how this is being extruded. So we have some that are bigger, some that are smaller, and I think that's a lot more of sort of that Greeble look than just the actual Greeble effect. And we still have the ability to add subdivisions and use islands where we can click them together or whatnot if we want, and stuff like that. So basically we come in here and add subdivisions if we want to, and that'll subdivide these faces for us this way. But we don't even really want to do that. We're just going to take this down to like 10. I think that's fine. And if we want to, we can actually just come in here and just copy our random selection, hold Control, bring it down beneath our extrude, and maybe make a lower chance here, change the seed. And then we could come in here and add a Greeble on top of that if we want to. So then we'll Greeble a random selection of these faces, and we can start to create just kind of this, smaller little subdividing face if we want to, which looks kind of neat. Or rather than that, we can actually come in here, and I believe there's a subdivide option. Yes, we can do subdivide on top of that. So now we can just come in here and just draw subdivisions in random areas. Change the seed, get completely different looks, choose what we're subdividing across, and then once again, grab another random selection, pull it down beneath that one, come back to extrude, and pull that over. And again, make that like 5 and offset that variation. And now we're creating a lot more of an organic look, but we actually are extruding our sides and stuff as well, because we have those faces subdivided. So we've already got a little more of a organic looking Greeble than the actual Greeble effector created, and we have a lot more control over everything as well. So on top of this, we could smooth it out and stuff like that, which I think looks horrible, but we could. But we don't want to. What we want to do is we want to come in here and now do another random selection. So we'll just click and drag that down, pull that underneath, and maybe up this one a little bit more. And then we can do what's called inset. And we can inset that. And what that's going to do is just allow us to inset some of these faces, and we can choose the variation that these are being inset. And then on top of that, we can grab another extrude and pull those out. So now we can have these like small little faces extruding out from our shape. So we have a lot more detail, and we can create a lot more on top of that. And then we can obviously come in here again with the Greeble, and we can just really start layering things in on top of each other, until we get like a very unique look, like so. And we'll come in here and change this to 0, and this to 5, this to 0, and this to 0. There we go. So now we have some very small little faces and organic shapes and things on top of everything. So we're looking pretty good. So what do we do now? Well, I think that looks pretty cool. So let's just go ahead and create like a black material, something like this. We'll just take a smart material. We'll go ahead and do like 2% black, and we'll make our metallist like 0.8. Take our IOR to 1.8 and make that roughness like 0.3. And we'll keep it real simple like that. And the one thing we definitely want to add to this is round corners. So we're going to go ahead and grab round corners. And what we want to do is grab this, throw it on our cube, right? And we'll go ahead and hit Redshift, render view. Take a look at this. And I want to solo these round corners. And obviously I need to make this smaller because they look a little too feathered. And so I'm going to come in here and say like 0.2, tighten those up, maybe give it more samples. And now when I grab this and plug this straight into the bump map, you don't need to plug it into the bump map node. You can unplug this, and now it's going to add a nice little bevel onto all of our sides, and we get this really cool looking Greeble just like that. And so what we can do now, the really cool thing is we can come in here and we'll go ahead and save this before we break our machine with all these subdivisions. I will say, as you start adding and layering and subdividing more and more, it does take a little longer to build because it's calculating more. So we're going to call this Greeble node ops. Node ops. All right. And what we can do is just come in here and say, let's create a sphere. Turn off our cube real quick. And we have our sphere here. And what we can do, besides just coming into our cube real quick, which when we turn back on, it'll calculate it back out, we can come in here and actually just change our geometry because we built this in a non-destructive way. And if we say, okay, well, actually, I want there to be a lot less Y segments, I'm going to make that 1 and we're going to stretch it out and we have like squares on top and long ones on the side. Or we can say, okay, 1 on the Z as well and make it kind of this cool little slicey effect like that. So we can come in here and just work procedurally just like so, and we can make it not even squares so we can have more rectangular shapes and stuff like that across our shape. But I like the 10, 10, 10. I think that'll be totally fine. So beyond this cool effect, we can turn this off and we can actually turn our sphere back on and we can just grab all of them and just copy them onto our sphere. And instantly, I say instantly, it's going to calculate it, but instantly it's going to add that onto that. So not only are we creating Greeble across, a surface of our cube, we can do it across any shape we want, any geometry we have, and create this really cool Greeble effect. So now we have like Cybertron here from Transformers, obviously. There we go. And we have this really cool Greeble sphere created. Just like that. And we can create, you could come in here and select faces and things and spread out things. But this is looking really, really cool. Do I want to do it on a sphere or a cube? Probably, I think a sphere looks really cool. So let's do that. And then what we can do is let's turn this off, copy this sphere, make a new copy of it. And then what we're going to do is just kind of lower the segments down to like 16, so we'll get bigger chunks. And we're going to turn off subdivide and the last few layers of subdivisions and stuff and turn this back on and see what we got. Maybe just turn on the random selection. Maybe we do need subdivide and that Greeble in the end there. Maybe like that. Maybe make it 20 segments. There we go. We can come in here, our selection, and just kind of increase that. And what I want to do is I want to create a new shader here. Bring this in, and basically I want to create just like glowing lines that are based on our geometry. So we're going to come in here and we're going to go to the actual size. I'm going to up it to like 53. So it's just bigger, maybe 55, just bigger than our last sphere. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in C and I'm going to type in round corners again. Round corners, but this time with round corners, what did we do last time? 0.2 and then 12. I want to actually use this to drive the opacity and create some glowing lines. We'll take our ramp, grab our round corners, plug it into our ramp, Alt Input, and then we're going to make this like a cyan blue. And slide that down. And we can solo that and throw this on the sphere and go ahead and open that up so we can see kind of what this is creating. Boom, like that. And we're going to plug that in, to our emission color. And obviously that's not going to affect it until we turn on emission weight, which we're going to go down here and up that to say 10. Maybe that's too much. We'll say 5 and start with there. Now, on top of that, I want to click and drag this and turn this to white because I want to use this as an opacity map. So firstly, I want to change this to step and this one down here to step as well. That way it's like a hard cutoff. I'm going to grab our round corners, plug it into this ramp texture, Alt Input, and we're going to isolate that, make sure this is on this sphere, and we'll take a look at what this looks like real quick. Save, hit render, and you can see we're kind of creating this. We're going to bring our white down because we want more of those squares to kind of show up, and we're basically just creating these little lines and shapes across our sphere, which is looking pretty cool. So now what we can do is grab this one, we'll just highlight that, we'll bring that down as well, and we're going to go ahead and add that into our center material emission color, and then our ramp into our opacity, and then we're going to scroll down here inside of our center material, our emission weight, we're going to set to 5, and unsolo that. And so now we see we get this like bright color going on here with this emission weight. And it just looks like white lines. It looks kind of weird because we don't have that sphere behind it. So let's go ahead and hit pause on this and go ahead and turn on our other sphere. And now when we hit play, we should have that glowy line layered on top of our sphere. So we could come in here and, you know, adjust this if we wanted to. There we go, and add more of those in there. But I think that's too much. I think it was better when we had sort of less going on. And we could just up the selection value here and maybe up the extrusion or change the extrusion offset a little bit. And so now when we have this, we'll have a completely different shape. We'll have that line coming in perfectly. Yep, that looks pretty cool. So it's like glowing on top of that. And then what we can do is actually probably take that sphere and take it down to like 52. So it's not jetting out everywhere as much. That looks nice and cool. Take this off, save it, shrink this down, grab this sphere that we have created, and just control click and drag and create an identical copy of it. But then just come in here and adjust some of these seeds on the random selection, and we'll get a completely different look just by doing that, which is really, really cool. We can come in here and just say, well, seed 5, I don't know. And we'll get a totally different look. And we're going to copy this one. Come down here to another look, change the seed again. We could even change the chance if we wanted to, but I think the chance is fine. And we're going to create a material that's just a little more just like shiny metal. So we're going to crank this up to maybe 60%. And I think that looks pretty good. Grab that, replace that on that sphere. So now we have 3 layers in here. And when we hit render on this, we'll go ahead and hit save, hit play. We should have a nice, cool looking metallic Greeble. Maybe this one's a little too bright. We can take it back down to like 20%. There we go. 50%. Yep, pretty cool. And obviously now we could come in here and add more lights and stuff on here. We can obviously change our area lights if we want, but I like the big top area light. Let's come in here and add just more lights. We've lost our, do we have, no, yeah. Let's add more lights. We'll go ahead and create an area light, do our target null and tag, make sure it's actually on our object up here. Grab this area light and just highlight it real harsh from the side. We'll take our big area light and lower it down to like 1, and we'll grab this area light and bring it over here in the front and lower that down and tighten that up as well and bring it up a little bit. And this side one we'll bring up a little bit as well and maybe lower it down. And we can come in here now and render this and see what that looks like. I might need to take this black. I might just need to delete the background out. Let's see, background, turn that off. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. We can make it black. We'll just take our psych white and turn it to black. There we go. And we can come in here with our camera and get real close. And the cool thing about this is we can actually, you know, see the geometry versus when we use the displacement with the texture layer and stuff, where we kind of have that limitation of, you know, being at the mercy of the texture map and seeing it at render time. So let's go in here and we'll say optical aperture 5 and focus distance, click right there. Render view, render that out. Pretty cool. I think our silver one is just kind of overpowering it, isn't it? So let's go ahead back to our silver sphere. And that first random selection, let's take that chance down to 10. And that should get rid of some of those. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So now obviously we need to adjust our focus point. We'll click like here. But we can come in here and start messing with the LUTs, color texture, obviously, but the bloom is going to be one that we can do. And with this material being so shiny, let's go ahead and make it darker so it's not quite as shiny, because we really want to be able to isolate our Greeble, our glowy lines. So we'll come in here to our glowy lines and crank that weight up to like 20. And that's going to make that more white maybe, but we can make it a little more blue. Whoops, wrong thing. Ramp. There we go, make it a little more blue. And now we have that, we can add those cool glowy line effects to that. And we can adjust our area light here, turn that down. Oh, it's this one, isn't it? Turn that one down. There we go. So now we have this cool glowy line on top of our scene. I'm not sure that we need to be that close to it. I think it's cooler to see that it's a full sphere. You can still add that bokeh to that as well. Click to focus right there. Boom. Very cool. Render that out. Yeah, so you can create Greebles, and obviously you could just take this and copy it onto our square again and do the same thing. Or change the shape or add displacement on here first, and it's just going to always layer on top of everything. So it's pretty cool. You can come in here and just procedurally generate Greebles and stuff on top of it. But I do think that doing it manually with the inset and the subdivide and the random selection tool gives you a lot more control than the actual Greeble node operator. So though the Greeble node operator is cool and exciting to see, I think the other operators actually make it easier to create a Greeble. But that's just me. I think that looks cool. I think the sphere would probably, the cube would probably look really cool as well. And we could come in here and render that out. We also could come in here and just choose like a cone or a pyramid or something and maybe do it on that, which might look really cool because it's, what's the different shapes altogether. So grab that, throw that on the pyramid. Boom, instantly get a really cool looking background just like that. Grab our black, throw it on there, make a copy of this. We'll grab our silver, throw it on there, and change up the random selection values. Smaller, there we go, just from the start. And then copy and paste. Delete that tag, delete that tag, delete that tag, throw our lines on there. And again, change the seed. Maybe up that, just change the seed. There we go. Hit render on this and see what a triangle, like a pyramid, looks like. That is very cool. Click. Yeah, let's grab our lights. And let's grab this light, turn it down to 1. And our other light as well. Turn that down to 2. There we go. And that looks pretty awesome. Render that out. And just like that, you can just quickly make a whole bunch of different shapes and Greebles very quickly. Maybe I'll make a pack of Greeble shapes. That'll be cool. Just for good measure, let's come in here and do this to our cube as well. We'll copy it, change the C to that first selection. Let's turn off everything else. Oops, not those. But pyramid we can turn off. And we'll make one more copy of the cube. Again, put this as here and just change that seed. Maybe make it a little smaller selection. There we go. And then we'll come back to our cool camera angle like so. And we'll go ahead and save. Redshift, render view. There's the pyramid, looked pretty cool. There we go, click to focus right here. Boom. It's pretty cool. Click to focus. Maybe we come in here to the glowy sphere, the glowy cube, and take some of these off. There we go. And then we can come in here and up the chance so we have kind of bigger lines running through this. Yeah. I think that looks cool. Turn our area light back on that we turned off. Yep, crank this up to like 4. And crank this one up to maybe 4 as well. Should brighten that up. Very cool. Let's grab this light on the side and just pull it up kind of this way to be a little more in front. We'll pull this target up like that. And then this up to the front. Here we go. Maybe we kind of catch that side a little bit more. And we'll take it down to 2 though, so it's a little more dramatic. Very nice. Yep, so you can come in here and look down at like this or something if you want, and click the focus, obviously. And really just have a cool, clean Greeble effect here. And render that out. Cool, so there you go. That's how you can make some really cool, procedural dynamic Greebles on any shape. It's kind of awesome. And you can animate it. You can come in here and animate the seed, subdivide, you can make it grow on. It's pretty cool that you can do all that. Things that you cannot do with like JS placements, Greeble texture maps, and stuff like that. So you run the issue of crashing your machine, but you can have more control. All right, cool. Thanks for watching.